Namaste. As the Minister for
Namaste. Our next session focuses on powering the green economy, balancing energy demand and supply for a sustainable future. I now request the following speakers to come on stage. Professor Guna Magesan, who after retiring as the Vice Chancellor of a research university in Gujarat, he helped promoting Manushya Blossom, a startup Siddha pharmaceutical company. He is currently the director of Osati Investments Limited in New Zealand. He has been a volunteer for the World Hindu Congress since its inception. In 2014, he was the CEO of World Hindu Economic Forum. Previously, he was a professor in Fiji National University. Prior to that, he was a senior scientist with the New Zealand government. His work on Hindu-Maori relations is well recognized. He is president of the Hindu Council of New Zealand. Next is Ms. Joanna Kay, who is the Program Director, International Strategy, Partnerships and Engagement, driving international clean energy strategies at the Superpower Institute. Shri Sandeep Khurana is the founder and director of 3I Strategy and senior advisor at AGP Sustainable Real Assets, with 25 plus years in finance and infrastructure. Shri Jay Saraf is the group managing director at Saraf Biogas Energies. He drives biogas and biomass initiatives, promoting clean energy and rural development across the region. Now, I'd like to hand over the session to Professor Guna Magesan. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya. It's good to see young people at this age, going to the first year at the university, coming on the stage for World Hindu Economic Forum. That's a very positive thing. Congratulations. Namaste. Warm greetings to all delegates, speakers, and guests. Welcome to this important session, Powering the Green Economy. Number of times these words were used in the last couple of days. And the whole thing is balancing energy demand and supply for the sustainable future. As the world accelerates its transition to greener and more sustainable economies, the energy sector faces a critical challenge. Now we have to see how to meet the rising global demand while reducing emissions and protecting the planet. Please note, the green economy is no longer optional. It is an urgent necessity calling for innovation, investment, and global collaboration. In this session, we focus on Australia's renewable energy transition, exploring investment opportunities, infrastructure gaps, and the growing potential for international suppliers and global partnerships to drive progress. From solar and wind to grid upgrades and energy storage, Australia is opening doors to strategic collaboration as ministers, the representatives from the government, from academia, everyone was mentioning in the previous sessions. We will also examine emerging efforts to commercialize greenhouse gas capture, a key step towards reducing emissions and building new value chains. This conversation is about more than energy. It's about aligning economic growth with environmental responsibility. Before I invite our esteemed speakers to present their papers, I would like to make a brief announcement regarding the question and answer process. All questions will be addressed only during the designated question and answer time at the end of the session. We kindly ask you to write down the questions as they come to your mind and keep them concise and relevant to the topic. This will help us to ensure a smooth and engaging discussion for everyone. Thank you for your cooperation. Let's now welcome our distinguished speakers as we explore how to balance energy demand and supply for sustainable, resilient future. The first speaker is Joanna Kay, who is the Program Director for International Strategy at the Superpower Institute. I'm very happy to hear Joanna also comes from New Zealand. We are neighbors. Where she leads global clean energy initiatives and partnerships. With 18 plus years of experience across Australia, China, and Bharat, she has shaped energy policy and climate-aligned trade, including pivotal roles at the Smart Energy Council and International Solar Alliance. Joanna has contributed to Australia's national hydrogen strategy and serves on multiple advisory boards. Recognized among Australia's top 100 energy players, she is known for her strategic insight and leadership in advancing Australia's net zero ambitions. I will now welcome Joanna to speak. And she will speak about, although you would have seen a topic slightly different, she will speak on accelerating global decarbonization, investing in Australia's green economy. Joanna, it's all yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me today. I will, if I click forward, oh, there we go. That's the start of my presentation. So firstly, I just want to say it is such a privilege to be here today to join you at the World Hindu Economic Forum here in Adelaide. Thank you very much for the warm welcome and the opportunity to share some thoughts on Australia's future economy, but also the role that we play in the global clean energy transition. I think it's important to also recognise that this is the first time Adelaide has hosted this prestigious event, and I certainly hope perhaps another time we can host it again, but also recognising that South Australia has put forward a bid to host COP31 next November, and I see forums like this as a really good opportunity to flex the local expertise in the room, but also demonstrate what a beautiful city that we share. I also just want to talk a little bit about my experience actually living in India. So I spent 3 years living in India working for the International Solar Alliance under Dr. Ajay Mathur and the president at the time, Minister R.K. Singh, who was Minister for New and Renewable Energy at the time. I think having the opportunity to speak in this forum is very nostalgic for me, and certainly as I see so many smiling faces around the room, I'm feeling very much the fond memories of my time during that period. So today I'm here to talk in my capacity from the Superpower Institute, fondly known as TSI. We're an independent, philanthropically funded economic think tank. And our work is focused on one question: how can Australia lead and thrive in a post-carbon world whilst helping others do the same? We believe that energy, clean trade, can underpin Australia's next wave of prosperity. And we believe it can play a vital role of supporting global decarbonisation efforts. So today, I'm sharing our vision with you. In this talk, I'll cover 3 key points. The first, why Australia holds a unique comparative advantage in a net zero carbon economy, how the emergence of clean trade and changes of global economies will shape this work, and also some of the policy frameworks that we need to unlock this opportunity. So let's start with what makes Australia special in this global context. Well, a few weeks ago, I think it was actually back in June, OECD released a report titled Climate Investment for Growth and Development. And it had one core message: that climate action isn't just a necessity, but it's also an economic opportunity. And the report also makes one sobering point. Countries like Australia, historically reliant on fossil fuel exports, will need to pivot, or they face real economic risks. The good news is we can pivot, and in fact, we are better placed in Australia than many other nations to benefit from the energy transition and decarbonise not just our economy, but working with others and decarbonise their economies. At TSI, we recently released a report called The New Energy Trade. It's available on our website, and I'll certainly share it for anyone that's interested. It was authored by our economist, Dr. Reuben Finnegan. The report asks a simple question: what will global trade look like in a world aiming for net zero? The answer: clean energy will increasingly be traded in embedded form, with industrial goods like green iron, aluminium, hydrogen, and fertilisers. And for Australia and others, this is a historic opportunity. Dr. Finnegan's analysis shows us that green energy intensive exports could earn 6 to 8 times more than today's fossil fuel exports to Australia's economy. Let me repeat that. We could earn 6 to 8 times more than we currently do with our fossil fuel exports. This is not about sacrifice, but this is the pathway to greater prosperity. Our founding director, and arguably one of Australia's most famous economists, Professor Ross Garnaut, has long championed this opportunity. He points to 5 key sources of Australia's comparative advantage in a post-carbon economy: world-class solar, wind resources, vast land and port access, abundant iron ore and transition materials, strong institutions with industrial know-how, and a skilled and adaptable workforce. These are the ingredients for a world-leading clean export economy. And if we get it right, Australia could generate $700 billion per year of clean exports. That's nearly 6 times what we earn today from coal and gas. So let's talk about what this means beyond Australia. Well, Australia's green commodities will benefit our trade partners, contributing to their decarbonisation effort and their industrial growth and development goals. Many of our key trading partners, like Japan, Korea, and even parts of Europe, lack the land and renewable sources needed to decarbonise their own industries affordably at home. And Australia's New Energy Trade report also states that Australia can cut global emissions by between 6.7% and 9.6% if we focus on our clean trade agenda. This is not just an opportunity for Australia, but I think it's actually a necessity that Australia does this. We also recognise that clean energy trade is the key to low-cost decarbonisation. We want to move from this old model of dig and ship to actually processing items onshore with embedded green energy and decarbonisation. Our New Energy Trade report, Dr. Finnegan states very clearly, in most major economies, there will not be enough clean, cheap energy available to meet the demand by the mid-century. This is Australia's opportunity to contribute to global climate mitigation and to benefit from large-scale exports. Our trading partners need clean industrial inputs, and this is where Australia steps in. This slide shows that the contribution of clean energy trade to bridging the supply-demand gap in 5 countries. I think you've got China, India, Japan, Korea, and Germany. In June, Professor Ross Garnaut spoke at Oxford in the UK. He said regions with poor renewable sources can stay globally competitive in manufacturing, but only if they import industrial inputs from renewable-rich countries like Australia. This is the heart of a clean trade partnership. But this is not just about exports. This is about helping the world decarbonise faster and at a lower cost. So let me give some more detail, and I'll take an example from our recently published Green Iron report. At TSI, we examined the costs of producing green iron in Australia. Our findings suggest that with the right policy to fix market failures, Australian green iron can become cost competitive with traditional high emissions iron. But to make this happen, we need to correct three major problems. The first, there is no global carbon price. The second, innovation is not supported at the scale required. And three, infrastructure is missing from key regions. With coordinated action, without coordinated action, investment will remain slow. But with smart policies, green iron becomes not just viable, but profitable for Australia and our partners. This is why policy matters. Government cannot do it alone. It must lead, especially when the private sector faces uncertainty. We recommend that the Australian government, along with others, advocate for an international price on carbon. We align domestic policies with those outlined in the Paris Agreement from 2016. We harmonise global standards for green exports, and we fast-track investment through sustainable finance taxonomy. These are not abstract goals, but doable steps that can provide private investment, reduce risk, and ensure that we all stay competitive in this new world. So let me say something very clearly. The cost of inaction is far greater than the cost of transition. The economic and social consequences of climate disruption through droughts, energy shocks, food insecurity are already being felt globally. Equally, if we pursue the wrong strategies like protectionism, and we see that every day in the news, global protectionism, trade protectionism, or isolation, we risk budget strain, stagnation, and instability. The smarter path is clear. Let's use our natural resources, invest in clean trade, but do it with informed and long-term policies. Most importantly, let's build trust-based partnerships with our trading neighbours. So what is actually at stake? Well, if we get this right, we can have higher paid jobs, we can deliver regional development, we can support manufacturing and innovation, and we can provide prosperity for future generations. This is what Australia needs. This is what the world needs. Let's lead with confidence. Let's lead and act with purpose. And let's build a clean economy together. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna, for finishing on time. And in fact, you have 2 minutes left too, which is good. There are some information that 700 billion is a very big number. I suppose let's see how many countries will follow so that they can do the similar decarbonization plan. Thank you very much. And our next speaker is Sri Sandeep Khurana ji. a strategy and transformation leader with over 20 years experience, founded 3I Strategy in 2014 to bridge vision and execution across Australia and APAC. He has led major transformation programs, including shared services and tax initiatives, and held roles like head of markets at Diligent and CEO of a US software firm, a board member at Energy Capital Global, and advisor at Crescendo Transcriptions. He holds degrees from a number of universities, including Adelaide, Monash, RMIT, and an INSEAD Global Leadership Certification, and is a PMP and Six Sigma Master Black Belt. We welcome Sandeep Ji for his presentation.
Namaste and good afternoon to all guests, delegates and dignitaries. My name is Sandeep Khurana and I serve as the Director of 3I Strategy. I want to begin by sincerely thanking you for the opportunity to be here with all of you today. I feel that I'm truly privileged to be here today, being one of the first Indian families in South Australia. I grew up in a very different world, and now I see a flourishing Hindu and Bharat origin community working together and as part of the wider Australian community. And in South Australia, I never believed I would ever see an event like this in my lifetime. I want to thank Swamiji, Rajendra and Team WHEF and the South Australian Government for their commitment to bringing this event together. Now it is a privilege to speak on an urgent topic that touches not just energy or economics, but our collective future. Australia's renewable energy transition, its investment opportunities, the infrastructure gaps that we must address, and the immense potential we have for global partnerships, especially with Bharat and the worldwide Hindu community and our friends. So who am I and what is 3I Strategy? The 3I Strategy, we focus on helping people and organisations navigate complexity. We live in a world that is filled with uncertainty, ambiguity, and rapid change. Often, we don't have all the information we need, and the choices before us seem difficult or unclear. So that's where we all come in. We all work as leaders to ask the right questions, and we all need to ask the hard questions to make clear decisions and move forward together with purpose. Our work together needs to be centred on helping businesses and communities adapt, survive, sustain, and ultimately succeed, no matter what the external environment. Our market development framework. So, to support this mission, we have developed a structured market development framework that accompanies our clients through their entire journey. We begin with market selection and assessment, then we move into a feasibility, planning and operating model design and go-to-market approach. We help with business establishment, capital connections and sustainable scale. Why do I say that? Because it's extremely important. I was part of the G20 and B20 in 2023 in India, and they talked about capital connections and the fact that a lot of the investment is going into the global north, but how much is actually going to be going appropriately to decarbonize the global south? And so the mix of capital and technology and contracts and financial forecasts need to be put together in a very clever way to ensure scale and decarbonisation with a problem we have at hand. And there were some very choice words in that room by the UN and others which I can't repeat on stage here, about the problem we have on hand at the moment. So this framework is especially valuable in the renewable energy sector. You heard from my good friend Ashish Milani about the RISE program, a wonderful partnership showing excellent outcomes between Australia and Bharat. Another one of the most meaningful examples of international collaboration is the Australia-Bharat Renewable Energy Partnership, backed in the highest levels of leadership, including annual summits involving both Prime Ministers. One of the key partners driving the Australian-Bharat Renewable Energy Partnership, and I'd like to acknowledge Professor Scott Hamilton from the Smart Energy Council, who ran their Australian conference in Adelaide recently for his contribution. The partnership focused on 4 areas. First, rooftop solar and workforce development. Secondly, the advancement of PV technologies. Thirdly, scaling renewable energy generation across diverse geographies. And fourth, deep cooperation in green hydrogen. What makes the partnership truly special is the engagement of not just governments, but the global Hindu diaspora and our friends across industry, academia, and civil society, all working together towards sustainable progress. The 3 key areas: 1, purpose, strengthening bilateral cooperation in renewable energy, especially distributed solar and grid management. The second one was workforce development and training, technology commercialisation, and investment facilitation. And thirdly was high-level engagement between government, industry, and academia. The next slide is about critical minerals. As we look at the future of clean energy, one area that demands special attention is critical minerals. I want to acknowledge Professor Mohan Yelashetty of the Monash University and a number of the other universities and associations that you can see on the screen today for their work in establishing deep links and research capability in this area. Again, I was with him in 2023 when we established part of that, relationship. Bharat sees Australia as a trustworthy, long-term partner in sourcing critical minerals, especially given Australia's rich reserves and strong governance. And you can see in the next slide what we're talking about in terms of the reserves that Australia has. So we're very plentiful. We need to work out ways of trading schemes, for example, that was talked about just now, so we can ensure that this is allocated to the appropriate countries and, where it's needed. Okay, just the next slide. This is Mohan and that particular partnership talking about the critical challenges. So they've talked about the potential for sovereign interference in mineral flows and the current lack of large-scale downstream processing within Australia. So where can Bharat support that? The solution lies in building a highly skilled workforce that operates to world-class environmental and social governance standards. Furthermore, we believe that Australian institutions can and should partner with respected Bharatiya institutions, including the IITs and many, many others, to co-create through joint research, IP development, and technology transfer. We can't act as competitors, but we need to act as collaborators driven by shared values, shared needs, and shared prosperity. In the next slide, I'm going to talk about another rapidly changing area, which is ESG. I'm sure you've heard of the phrase. So we are now witnessing a fundamental shift in how companies are expected to account for their environment and social impact. In the last few years and ongoing, ESG reporting standards were updated across Australia, Bharat, Malaysia, the European Union, and many other countries with the ISSB framework. These changes are not symbolic. They are reshaping investor behaviour. Consider this. 8 out of 10 global investors now say that the quality of a company's ESG reporting directly affects whether they invest or not. More than 3/4 have divested from companies that fail to meet ESG expectations. And nearly 2/3 of companies that have found that they've got improving ESG transparency have helped them to win new business and retain clients. So ESG is no longer about reputation, it's about becoming a decisive factor in capital allocation client trust, and being competitive. So how does that actually help and impact India? I know we're talking about Australia, but I'd like to actually talk about what they call Scope 3 and supply chain. So we're now in ESG looking at Scope 3 emissions, the supply chain. I heard, for example, that a clothing and fashion brand in Australia, another one in the UK, and another one in the US, are now currently sending letters to their suppliers in India and Bangladesh and other countries in the global south, threatening they will move their factories if they don't comply with ESG rules. So this is very real. These factories employ thousands of women and give livelihoods to their families. We really need to ask the hard questions. I want to thank Texilla, an Indian financial data management business in over 20 countries, and now setting up in South Australia about processes. The particular company, Texilla, processes currently about 10% of India's invoices. Despite the growing importance of ESG, the reality on the ground is that most companies are still struggling. So data is needed for ESG reporting across departments, for example, finance, HR, procurement, supply chain, and external vendors. Up to 70% of companies are collecting ESG and they see it as a major hurdle. And nearly 60% admit that their ESG is not audit ready. Many are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on consulting and reporting tools, a cost that only increases when they need to get third-party assurance. So without automation, these timelines clash with financial reporting cycles, leading to delays and missed deadlines. For mid-sized firms, it's not just inefficient, it's unsustainable. So in a world where ESG is becoming a gateway to capital, this is no longer a nice to have, it's a competitive necessity, not just in Australia, but in the global south. Extremely important for India, and I'm glad that they're also looking at changing their rules for mandatory reporting in the last year or so as well. Next one is an example that I'd like to show, just the next slide, on no capex in energy infrastructure. So an example. So we urgently need scalable zero capex clean energy solutions, right? We need to actually understand how we can understand the risk profile of different countries and companies so we can invest appropriately in those countries for decarbonisation. So Australia and Bharat, like much of the world, is seeking to transition its infrastructure without disturbing much of its operations or their budgets. So the solution lies in clean energy as a service models, where solar panels, battery systems, and smart building retrofits are deployed with no upfront cost. So I've been working with a company called AGP, or Ampere, whose owner and a friend of mine, Rajpal Chaudhry, who's invested more than $14 billion between Australia and India and a part of the EU. And he's from Rajasthan, and he's currently got over 10 gigawatts of solar across India, Australia, and the EU on projects which are looking at these types of methods of decarbonisation. They're proven, financeable solutions that can remove the biggest barriers to energy, which is capital at scale. Just the next slide on digital twins and performance contracts. So this is an actual example that how we can actually do what I'm talking about in terms of performance contracts. So lean infrastructure is not just about hardware, it's about data and the ability to model, predict, and optimize energy use. So digital twin technology allows us to create virtual replicas of real-world infrastructure which can be used to simulate energy performance, forecast savings, and identify efficiency gains. This model of a building very close to here was done only a few days ago by an engineer in Pune. And what it shows is combining performance-based energy contracts. Clients only pay for verified savings. The idea is you need to make these particular decarbonisation efforts investable. So using data can actually help to support that. The workforce which is going to be able to do that is obviously going to be from Australia and the technology from countries like Australia, but almost certainly it has to have India and Bharat as part of the equation, is what I'm saying. I'd like to notice that there is a very good company in the room, PowerTech Energy, which also had a stall, and I'd like to acknowledge Anoop, who also looks at automation in the best possible way. So thank you, Anoop, for what you're doing. Next is, very quickly, I've only got 50 seconds. I've got a couple of minutes extra, right? Because, so I'm going to use it. All right, so waste to energy, right? Now we know we've got a very big topic coming up on waste to energy very shortly, but it's a crucial and often overlooked part of the transition in waste to energy. So in my view, this is one of the greatest untapped opportunities in Australia's mix. And I'd like to thank another South Australian company, Phytech Bioenergy, that is building this industry in the country. So converting waste into energy achieves three critical goals: energy and fuel security, sustainable waste management, and a circular economy, where resources are recovered instead of discarded. And as we can see over 50 projects in the Australian market which can commence any particular time. I'm proud that 3R Strategy is in the final stages of securing about $200 million for credit facilities to do this in Australia. That's the next slide. Very quickly, I want to thank Frank Bruno and Dharam Budhi from the University of South Australia, who are collaborating with the help of the Australia-India Strategic Fund for Thermal Energy Storage in the universities in India, and this is a great example of collaboration. I want to also thank the people yesterday in the renewable session. We ran a network yesterday for renewables and look forward to connecting with them to build plans for action to collaborate for the benefit of Australia, Bharat, and the wider Hindu community. One immediate plan of action is ensuring the right people can connect. And there are platforms and systems like ProFinder's Australian Bharat Marketplace, which have already been vetted by the critical minerals industry, and is an example of building efficient networks in the industry. So final wrap up, why is this all so urgent? Because the global context is changing. Energy security, climate targets, and sustainable finance are now top priorities, not only for governments and investors, but for communities everywhere. Bharat in Australia, along with the global Hindu community and our allies, share values, innovative thinking, and an entrepreneurial attitude. We need to share a moment of opportunity where capital, technology, and leadership can come together to create a cleaner and more just future. The technology exists, the capital is available, the partnerships are forming. All we need to do now is have commitment and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep ji. Now I'll invite the third speaker, Jay Saraf ji. He is the Group Managing Director of Saraf Biogas Energies and Director at Saraf Global, leading renewable energy innovation in Southeast Asia. Based in Thailand, he oversees biogas and biomass power generation projects, advancing clean energy and rural development. With 15 years plus experience and an MBA from Chulalongkorn University, he is known for championing sustainability across industries. He will be speaking about commercializing capture of greenhouse gases. I welcome Jay Saraf ji.
Thank you. Good evening. Namaste. Sawadee. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak in the last panel of this wonderful forum. And I'm the last speaker, so just bear with me for the last 15 minutes. Then we are at the conclusion of this whole event. I'm following up after Joanna and Sandeep, who have spoken quite a bit about renewable energy and decarbonization. The world is facing a lot of climate change challenges. We see a lot of extreme weather patterns which are linked to climate change. And the world has talked about the cause being greenhouse gases. They are a problem, but they are also an opportunity because there's a lot of commercialization possible today to create value out of it. So when we talk about greenhouse gases, there are pretty much two major ways of getting it, commercializing it. One is to capture it and utilize it. And the second one is to prevent it from coming out, or basically not allow it to be released into the environment. So pretty much in greenhouse gases, we are now talking about two major factors, which is methane and carbon dioxide. But I'll be focusing more on biogas, which is methane-based technologies. So what are the benefits of capturing greenhouse gases worldwide? It's in Asia Pacific, but it's globally. One is we mitigate climate change. We create value from waste, which was a problem. There are economic incentives of doing it, which Joanna and Sandeep both hit on. There is a big trend by the consumers and investors worldwide to reward green energies, green companies who are not polluting the environment. So there's an economic incentive now to not be a polluter and capture these gases. There's an energy efficiency component to that, as you can capture those gases and convert that to energy in your own operations, creating more energy efficiency, as well as becoming green at the same time. And it also does support sustainability goals, which are there from country to country and globally. I think almost every country is part of the Paris Agreement and have a target to be carbon neutral. Different countries have different targets, but most of them are pushing very aggressively. Bharat is, I think, leading in terms of renewable energy now. So how can the gases be commercialized? First, initially, when I started 15 years ago, it used to be the carbon markets. Used to talk about carbon credits. The prices were almost 12 euros to 15 euros a carbon credit. Then the market crashed. It went down to 1 euro cent. And because there were a lot of misrepresented projects. But now it's come back. There is a big market, carbon market, both regulated and unregulated, which provides value to companies who are capturing these gases and are utilized by companies that are releasing carbon into the atmosphere. So which is the next point, which is carbon offsetting projects. So for example, data centers today require a lot of energy. And a lot of the energy is still fossil-based. And you have Google, Apple, all these big companies who are setting up data centers are now setting up projects where they do reforestation or buy clean energy or invest in clean energy projects or carbon capture projects to sort of offset the carbon that they're releasing. Then you also have green product certification. As Sandeep just said, there's a trend by consumers and manufacturers to demand green products from the manufacturers, where they want a clean and ethical production of the products, and that's where another market is coming up. And lastly, innovation and patents. In this forum and in this economic forum, I've met many people who have come up with innovative technologies from electrolysis, green hydrogen, and other things that are helping to, again, take this forward. So in terms of global context of greenhouse gas commercialization, like I said, global carbon markets and trading schemes are there, which are, again, EU, China is having its own. International carbon markets are there. In Thailand, the government is now procuring green power or renewable power and selling it to industries who have export quotas for countries who are importing products. They have said, okay, we want this much carbon footprint. So there is a market there. There's also a UN-backed framework for agreements. There's private sector companies, banks are now looking actively to invest in companies or renewable energies or give them loans where you can generate carbon credits as well as to see that you have an economic and social impact. And lastly, there is, of course, climate finance and green investment, which both Joanna and Sandeep brought it up. I think Sandeep just mentioned a number where 80% of the investors are looking for ESG performance. And so if you have a good value proposition, then there's easy finance available in the market. I think Bharat is a good example of this. Under Nitin Gadkari, a lot of bio-CNG projects were created, which was basically nothing but waste to energy and capturing the greenhouse gases. And we are now seeing more and more energy being generated from the land in a circular economy. In terms of Thailand's context, as I'm operating out of Thailand, there is a nationally determined contribution of 30 to 40% from renewables. The target is to be carbon neutral by 2050. They want net zero GHG emissions by 2065. The targets are very long because from an agrarian economy, if you don't capture it properly, there will be some greenhouse gases being released. And Thailand is a pretty much agriculture-based economy. And so there is a lot of potential for greenhouse gases, capture and commercialization there. There was a lot of government incentives initially. We were a beneficiary of that when we set our initial biogas project. Since then, once the technology has matured, the government has now made it mandatory for every industry to have their own wastewater treatment systems where they capture the biogas and treat the effluent water. And there's a focus on energy as well. So why all this focus on greenhouse gases? Because it's almost 84 times more potent in creating global warming and more potent than, carbon dioxide, and 45% of the global warming is attributed to these gases. But there is definitely a lot of untapped value here. So at Saraf Global, we started this journey 20 years ago in 2004, where we set up our first biomass plant utilizing palm waste. We were the first of the biomass industries globally who were using empty fruit bunches as a biomass fuel. The challenge with most of the organic and agricultural waste is that there's a high moisture content and a very low mass or carbon content. So empty fruit bunches have 70% moisture in them. So in order to make it combustible, you have to remove the moisture, which gives rise to effluents. And the treatment of that is nothing but generating biogas. And so we started with biomass, ventured into biogas, and from there we set up one of the largest biogas plants at that time, generating almost 1,000 cubic meters of gas per hour, biogas per hour. And since then, we have provided the technology to a number of companies, and we have our own entity, Renewsys, which provides a complete turnkey solution for all types of organic waste effluents to be converted into biogas and other revenue sources. The advantage of capturing these gases is that you can create a very good circular economy. So for example, I'm not sure whether it is very visible, you can have one waste stream coming in. So in our case, it was an empty fruit bunch. When you do demoisturization, you remove the moisture, you get solid materials which are converted into biomass fuel or renewable fuels to be used in power plants. The waste stream then goes into, can create, if there's an oil content, you can recover oil and sell that out, which can be a significant source of revenue. You can generate biogas, which is capturing all the methane emissions. We are generating about 18,000 megawatts a year from our biogas operations. And after treating the digestate, you get what you call as very black effluent water. And when you remove the suspended solids, you get biosolids, which are very rich in nutrients, which can become fertilizers. And it goes into the plantation again. And lastly, the water stream can be purified to be potable, and hardly the TDS is like liquid fertilizer again, which can improve the plantation's life. So you can actually create a very complete circular economy whereby you get it from the plantations and send it back to the plantations, creating a real unique value proposition. This is a very simple flow chart, looks complicated, at our plant, where we have the digesters, the desulfuric, to remove the sulfur H2S removers. We have moisture removers and then the gas engines. And then further, we have the process for treating the wastewater. How is this relevant for Australia, right? So in Australia, you have a big landmass, but is also having a lot of agrarian economy. So agriculture still contributes 50% of the greenhouse gases. And if that can be converted and captured, then it can create waste to energy opportunities. And when you create biogas, like we have mentioned here, about 30 tons can replace 45 tons or 43 tons of diesel a day. And so it's a direct relevance to the transportation economy in Australia. It can help with the mines as well, where it can be used as liquefied CNG. And there are many more opportunities available in this. So what are the opportunities here with us in RenewSys company? We have a very high rate of removal for COD. We almost have 95% and above removal of COD, which translates into larger amounts of biogas. We have a very high state-of-the-art facility to treat the wastewater and digester. We have a very low energy and low cost solution of less than $1.75 per meter cube of water for treating it and recovering all the nutrients and creating good water so that there's no shortage of water. And lastly, it's again creating a circular economy of sending the sludge as fertilizers. So this is where we are, and we are very happy to collaborate with anybody and share our technologies with them. That's it from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, JG. We have now the time for questions, but before we open to the audience, I'd like to ask both Joanna and Sandeep regarding how the work you are doing is really great. I just want to know, because I come from New Zealand with Maori, lots of Maori people who I connect with. Here I'm just wondering what steps are being taken to include indigenous and local communities in your energy planning and benefits, how they are getting benefited.
I'm happy to take this one to start. Look, I think the role of Indigenous people globally, and certainly our Indigenous Australians and First Nations Australians, are fundamental in global decarbonisation. We certainly see it at a global level. How do you actually integrate some of these Indigenous practices and methodologies into creating new world order, particularly in industrial processes? So there's certainly that happening at a global level. I think at the domestic level here in Australia, we see a lot of opportunities to engage through First Nations owned businesses, and certainly I know here in South Australia there's some really incredible action being taken by First Nations communities. There's a group in Murray Bridge that is leading some work in around solar recycling. And thinking about it in the way that First Nations have a connection to land and country, and certainly seeing the role of taking those critical minerals back to be able to be reused as part of that connection to longevity in the way that we treat and manage our land use. If I think back to last year when I was on the advisory board for the hydrogen strategy rewrite, Australia was one of the first countries to write a hydrogen strategy, just for context, behind Germany and Japan, and we rewrote our hydrogen program last year. That program and everything that we did in regards to that was looking at the lens of First Nations Australians and how they can contribute to it. I think certainly in the work that I spoke about, green iron, certainly hydrogen production that we know is going to be required for green iron. These are all done in communities that are often very much part of First Nations relationships with land. It's also regional communities that don't necessarily have the opportunity to thrive in a post-carbon world. I think, in South Australia we have a steel facility in Whyalla that some of you might be familiar with. The program in Whyalla has taken some turns. I think I'll leave it there. But it's certainly the focus on that is how do we make that steel mill produce green steel? How do we create opportunities in regional Australia that others can then prosper? I think when we are thinking about closing down facilities or moving to new energy trade, the reality is that that will actually hugely affect regional communities in Australia. So what we actually need to do is ensure that we're creating new industries so those communities can continue to thrive. Sandeep?
Thank you, Joanna. You've answered it really well. What we've seen is that more recently, I think the Indigenous population, their land, when we're doing the development and permits, has now been included a lot better than it was, say, 5 or 10 years ago. There are still some issues that happen in certain parts of the country, but that's an important part of respecting that they are the original inhabitants of the land and that we respect it when we go for the development process. I'm also seeing, in terms of skills development and workforce management, the idea of being able to train Indigenous communities to be able to be part of the development and engineering and installation of these projects, whether it's solar panels, whether it's being part of the overall development and ongoing maintenance of the projects that are happening, so that they actually feel that they're embedded as part of the entire process. Talking about embedded, I think perhaps there's a good way that we could look at the Sunway University yesterday talking about embedding value. So I think that perhaps we need to dig deeper on that particular methodology to see how it can embed value of the Indigenous community into all the processes and ROI that we have in Australia as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna and Sandeep ji. Now the questions are open to all delegates if you have any questions.
It's tough
Any
because
questions?
it's the end of the day.
Sir. Arey bhai, little bit faster. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ashok Chaugale. I'm the Vice President of Vishwa Hindu Parishad in Bharat. We talk about the renewable energy. I think hydel energy is included as part of the renewable energy. If that is correct, okay, can be answered. Secondly, okay, that all these energies have intermittent supplies, particularly wind and solar. So what's the status of the battery technology? I see that some of the exhibitors have, seem to have good solutions. I'm not a technical person, so I don't know that. But is development of battery technology is included in all these schemes that are being proposed?
I'm happy to take that one, and then certainly pass over if either of you gentlemen want to add. Certainly I think about hydrogen in the context of renewable energy. When I think about hydrogen, particularly in Australia's context, I'm thinking about renewable hydrogen or green hydrogen. I think we have an abundance of renewable energy sources, like many countries, actually certainly similar to India in a way. We have an abundance of sunshine and wind, and we should be making green hydrogen, so hydrogen produced through the use of renewables. Certainly there are other colours or shades or carbon intensive hydrogen production, but in my mind Australia should only really be considering green hydrogen or zero carbon hydrogen as part of that conversation. Certainly battery development and storage more broadly is actually one of the key areas that are fundamental to our energy transition. So we know that we can't transition effectively anywhere in the world without having adequate storage. And we can get storage through hydrogen. Actually, you can create energy, store it in hydrogen and then use it in the evening when it's not required, when we don't have wind and solar. But batteries particularly, and storage more broadly, is fundamental to the energy transition. I'll pass over to these two gentlemen who might be a bit more technical minded than I am, but certainly we are talking about storage as a fundamental part of the energy transition here, but also globally.
Thank you, Joanna. I'll just briefly answer about battery storage. So certainly it's now fundamental to achieving decarbonisation, to ensuring that there is no excess in the grid and stabilisation of the grid. There's improvement in trading technologies and being able to work with the regulators to give access to not just large developers, but also to homes from July 1 this year as well. So that's actually going to be allowing the ability for homes in across Australia to achieve and get a discount on their batteries to be able to then participate in energy storage as well. So then that's an important component of battery and battery storage, being able to trade. I see virtual power plants, for example, and community grids to be an important part of that growth story. What I'd like to see from an India standpoint here, though, is that I don't see too many batteries coming out of India to Australia yet. I'd like to see how that can actually accelerate, that we can see good battery manufacturing happening out of India that can come out to Australia so that we can utilise and actually diversify our supply chain as well. So that's a critical component.
Can I just add one thing? I was actually had the privilege of visiting the Ola battery lab in Bengaluru last year or the year before, and I was absolutely blown away by the work that was being done in that lab to create new battery systems that would rival anything coming out of China. The talent in the room was phenomenal. I think every person in there had a minimum of one PhD, and so you couldn't knock the innovation that was happening at that lab. And I think when it comes to we all recognise that China has been doing batteries for a while and has some technology there. There's certainly some parts, particularly the Ola factory in Bengaluru, that are doing some incredible work on battery development as well.
So I'm Colonel Ashok Kinia, a promoter of green business in Bharat. I just want to have one question. 18,000 megawatt of biogas energy, electricity. I just want to know what are the hardship and difficulties which you faced while establishing it, sir. That's it.
Well, with any biomass or biogas, the feedstock, which is an agri product, is never consistent throughout the year. So that becomes a challenge in itself. But other than that was identifying the right technology, identifying the right sort of bacteria in order to ensure that the digestive process happens properly and on time. And then figuring out, because we all talk about just generating biogas, but there is a much lengthy process of treating the effluent after the biogas has been generated. So technically there are 5 things in a waste stream: COD, BOD, TSS, TDS, and what we call color, right? So pH. So biogas only treats the COD. You have to then treat all the other 4 elements, and having that right fit of technology will ensure that the entire process is smooth. Otherwise, you are just delaying the problem. So having that entire solution or suite of solutions gives you the right fit of technology to ensure that you can get to that 18,000. In fact, we are trying to expand it up now to close to 30,000. That's our next target.
Thank you. The last question, it should be a very short one. Thank you.
Okay, hello, I'm Dave, law student from Sydney. My question was to Joanna regarding the Australian economy. 6% of the Australian economy is in manufacturing. 6% of Australia's GDP comes from manufacturing. What compositional changes are needed in Australia's economy, both from a labour force point of view and from our total production, to ensure we can actually achieve the requirements with regard to green energy transition and what we export to become an export powerhouse in greenhouse emission, green.
Thank you. What a brilliant question to end the day on, and not an easy one to answer. So thank you. Look, I think we see it in the federal government's Future Made in Australia initiative or legislation that was created last budget cycle, which is around $26 billion towards creating more jobs in manufacturing in Australia and recognising that this is a key part of something that Australia can do and contribute globally as well. One of the things I think that's really important when we think about the energy transition, and not just from an Australian standpoint, is doing things that we do well and letting others do things that they do well as well. Like, I think we should think about the opportunities that Australia can actually make a difference in, and let others do other parts that we know that they can make a difference in as well. So I just want to make that very clear. I know India has a really strong ambition around solar manufacturing, and I think that's really important and something that Australia should be supporting, and supporting through supply chains, through critical minerals that I think was mentioned beforehand, and certainly technology exchange as well. When I think about manufacturing in Australia, I think what we can actually offer global supply chains, particularly in regards to clean commodities. The example of green iron is a really easy one. I think for Australia, it's a low-hanging fruit, we would say. We already export a huge amount of iron ore to trading partners globally. And the requirement now is changing. So a lot of our trading partners are requesting green iron. And for those not familiar with what green iron looks like, it is basically you take this is the very non-technical term, you take the rock, and you can do a lot of the carbon-intensive processing of that iron ore using the renewables that you have in the grid. You can use it with hydrogen. You can extract and create basically embedded decarbonisation through iron pellets, which means that you can ship more of that commodity overseas, and then it can go to other regions, which can then produce steel, particularly for automotive industry, and they can then produce greener vehicles, greener construction goods and whatnot. So I think with what is the key question here was like, how do we actually create part of that manufacturing capability here in Australia? I think it's by doing the things that we do best. We already have a whole workforce that's really good at extracting things from the ground. So let's actually process some of those minerals here, strategic and critical minerals, as well as our iron ore. Here in South Australia, we have an abundance of magnetite, which is a really high-grade iron ore and very simple to actually produce as green iron. In Western Australia, parts of the Pilbara particularly, is a different type of iron ore. It's a hematite, which can also be processed as well. So it's about recognising what our strengths are and actually leaning into that, but also thinking about our position as part of a global shift to decarbonisation, and working with our key trading partners and working with others to actually create supply chains across some of these key sectors as well.
Thank you, Joanna. I take this opportunity to extend our heartfelt thanks to all our distinguished speakers for their wonderful presentations, and also our audience for engaging with questions. You have each added tremendous value to the conversation now on how we can power a green economy while maintaining a delicate balance between rising energy demands and our planet's finite resources. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank all the speakers here with us today for their valuable insights on powering the green economy, balancing energy demand and supply for a sustainable future. I think we should all give them a big round of applause. Now I'd like to hand it over to Rituji to move on to the next item in the agenda.